In a world without pre-order DLC, or people raging about it, comes Indie Pride with another Call of Warhammer commentary on Medieval 2. I've got a very nice multiplayer replay of Dwarfs vs Border Princes to share with you all today. As we open up the replay, a Grudgebringer cannon for the Border Princes opening up on a Dwarf army in the background there. You can take a look at my army right here. I am playing as the Dwarfs. My army consists of 3 Norse Dwarf crossbows, 3 hammers, 1 Dwarf warrior, 4 Longbeards, 2 Ironbreakers, 2 Elders, a Greatbeard general with great axe, and 3 Grudgethrower Catapults. I also have a miner thrown in there just to throw some. They're basically a Nafatoon unit that throws some flaming grenades. Very interesting unit. And I have some stakes deployed up front. And how I'm playing right now is typically how you're going to be seeing the Dwarfs played in Total War Warhammer, I believe. They don't have any mobility at all, so the way they're going to be played mostly in multiplayer is with gun lines, camping on a hill with artillery, and making their opponents come to them. As you guys probably know, a lack of mobility in any Total War game generally means you're going to get outflanked by enemy cavalry and maybe completely destroyed, surrounded, and pooped on. So the way you counter this is by camping hills, and I think we're going to be seeing that a lot in Total War Warhammer. But take a look at the Border Prince army real quick as the Grudgethrower Catapults open up on this army. He has 6 Tilean Legion, 4 Druzhina axes, 4 Border Prince heavy cavalry, 2 cataphracts, and 2 Grudgebringer cannons out in the background, doing a lot of damage to the middle of my formation. So as we see the Tilean Legion cross the field here, you can kind of get a really good look at the Grudgethrower Catapults. Grudgethrower Catapults are really interesting because they're basically the Dwarfs' way of throwing the insults and the grievances they have against their enemies back at them. So if you do something to piss the Dwarfs off, they're going to carve whatever you did into the stone, write it down, and then throw it back at you with the Grudgethrower Catapult. So I've always thought that was kind of interesting, just a way for them to get back at their enemies. But we can see the Tilean Legion charging in right now. It is important to note that the stakes that I have up front are just to ward off enemy cavalry. They don't do anything to infantry, so he can charge right through. But we're getting a good look at the Dwarf warriors and some of the Longbeards charging in against the Tilean Legion, which, by the way, look completely badass, modeled off the Venetian hammers from Medieval 2. So if you're wondering who the hell the Border Princes are, I don't blame you. They are a collection of tiny kingdoms and principalities situated just south of the Empire, bordering the Badlands. So they have a lot of conflict with the Greenskin tribes that live in that region. But basically, in this mod, they're made up of a bunch of Tilean and Estalian mercenaries, and they can field a very balanced assortment of troops. They have very good artillery, very good cavalry, some really solid infantry units, especially the Tilean Legion. So they're a faction that kind of has to be feared in Call of Warhammer. I realized going into this battle that I wasn't going to have the mobility advantage. So his cataphracts and his heavy cav are going to be able to charge what they want to when they want to. That's why I brought the Elders. Elders are extremely tanky, and they have a ranged ability. They can use pistols to shoot incoming cavalry, and they can basically tank cavalry charges. So the great thing about the Dwarves in general, even though they don't have mobility, all of their infantry units, including their skirmishers, are very tanky. So you can see right here, he just charged into the back of me with some of his heavy cavalry, and my Norse Dwarf crossbows are just kind of tanking all that damage. And the good thing is, they can get charged a couple of times. I can tie down his cav, and then start shooting him with the miners or with my own elders. So I have to be very wary of this cavalry. They can do a lot of damage in the back of my lines, which is why I've kept a lot of my troops in reserve to focus on a lot of these cavalry charges that are coming in. But Gojira's already done a really good job of getting into my Grudgethrowers, so basically all of my catapults have stopped firing because they're all tied down, or they just don't have line of sight on the Tilean Legion, and that means that I've already spent 6,000 talents on units that are really not doing any damage to the enemy anymore. And they barely did any damage when Tilean troops were crossing the field. So Grudgethrower Catapults probably not particularly useful, but they are going to do a little bit here and start shooting his cavalry as I tie him down with some Ironbreakers over there in the back. Those heavy cav are beaten to hell, and the main line engagement is going okay for me. I've committed my Greatbeard General into the center, and his Tilean Legion has done decently in melee, but honestly shouldn't expect to beat Dwarfs one-on-one in melee combat, especially not Greatbeards. So you can see them, they're trying to cut through, they are struggling, and you can see some wavering and routing in the background there. but Longbeards with axes in melee, cutting through a bunch of them. And this front line wasn't really expected to win. It was just supposed to tank up the melee engagement while he got his cavalry into flanking positions. So I expected to win the infantry engagement with the dwarfs. It's where the cavalry come in. If you can get some really big hammer and anvils off, which is very possible with the border princes, that's going to be a big problem for me. So I feel like I've been doing a decent job so far of preventing those huge charges, but you can see some wavering and some routing on my line. That's just the Dwarf Warrior, one of my cheapest melee units, but they are routing from the field at this point. And you can see my elders firing in the background there, using their pistols to shoot into his cav. I'm not worried about his infantry at this point at all. I am mostly worried about that cav, because if he can tie down my more elite troops and then get hammer and anvils off on the elders or the Greatbeards, that's when I'm going to have a lot of issues. But so far, done a decent job of keeping reserves and making sure he doesn't charge really important targets. And his cav is having a lot of troubles cutting through my elders. Elders cost 4,000 talents, which is very, very expensive. And this battle is being fought on 50,000 funds, by the way. So we both were able to afford a lot of artillery and a lot of elite melee troops. But he's having trouble cutting through. Like, the dwarfs are good at one thing, or a couple things. They're good at fielding a lot of ridiculous range units. They're good at camping, and they're good at bringing really tanky melee infantry. So where you give up, what you give up in the lack of cavalry, you make up for in very sturdy infantry. But in a total war game, to be honest, I'm a little dubious of how good dwarfs can be when they aren't camping. As you can see at the beginning of this battle, I didn't charge across the field because I knew that that would just open me up to cav charges and make it really difficult for me. So you really do have to find a defensive position with the dwarfs and just kind of, for lack of a better word, camp it out and hope that you can survive the onslaught from whatever's coming your way. So he is charging into the back of my line here. I do have a bunch of crossbows shooting into his flanks at this point. He should be focusing on my crossbows first and foremost. You can see that he's shooting at them with the Grudgebringers, which is the right idea. But the problem is he hasn't really been charging my crossbows as much as he should with his cav. He's trying to get my elders off the field, which I understand. But even though the crossbows are very tanky and can take some cavalry charges, the elders are 2 or 3 times as strong against cavalry charges. So he should have been trying to take the crossbows off the field, because they're going to be really good at killing his cavalry if he doesn't take them off the field very quickly. So he's actually running out of cav at this point. You can see the balance bar shifting very much in my favor. Again, in Call of Warhammer, balance bar isn't always accurate. In fact, a lot of the time it's not. But I'd say right now it's being pretty accurate in terms of portraying how close this battle is and who's taking the advantage. I think that he had a couple of really good chances early on to get big strikes onto the back of my lines, but just the way I kind of set up my army made it very difficult for his cavalry to find gaps to exploit. He did do a good job getting into my Grudgethrower Catapults and killing those, making sure they stopped firing, but he wasn't able to do a lot of damage to my main line with hammer and anvils after his infantry engaged. So I think maybe taking a little bit longer to get his infantry into melee, but giving more time for his cav to get around behind might have been the play. Not 100% sure, but we can see 2 very brave dwarf longbeards charging into a group of crossbows, see what they can do in melee combat against them. Don't expect them to be able to do too much. The funny thing about Medieval 2 is, even if you charge very low attack and defense units, they have very quick attack animations. Peasants and crossbows and any dagger-wielding troops basically have very quick attack animations, and when they outnumber you, they stun lock you, and they can kill even elite troops if they outnumber you greatly. So that's probably what's going to happen to those two. Very brave Longbeard Axe is going to die in melee. Kind of embarrassingly to crossbows, but with the Medieval 2 engine, it's just kind of how the game works. My Greatbeards are in melee here. This is getting bad for me right now. They're getting shot in the flank by a bunch of crossbow units. They have a ton of armor, but they don't have a shield block chance, so he can do a lot of damage if he gets some more time to shoot into my flank, and that is my general unit. I don't want to lose them here. A lot of the dwarf units are very high morale, and losing my gen wouldn't be catastrophic, but it's still not one of those things you want to have happen. It can cause morale ripples, morale shocks to your army that could lose you a game. So I am finally breaking his main line, and yep, then my gen dies right there in a hail of Grudgebringer volleys. So that's not good for me, but his main line is breaking, and a lot of my troops are now giving chase. Of course, Dwarfs giving chase to a human opponent is kind of comical, because with their little stumpy legs, they can't really give chase too well. They're pretty slow. So I'm going to be running across the field trying to rout his troops, but he does have the Grudgebringers in the background still firing on my guys, and I am beaten to hell at this point. I have very little in the way of full strength units. In fact, I don't believe I have a single actually full strength unit on the field at this point. Most of my guys are below 30 men, as you can see, just little bands of dwarfs here that are alive. Most of them are completely dead, and that fight took it out of me. I lost a lot of guys to those cavalry charges. I lost a lot of guys to the Grudgebringers who are still firing on my men, and I lost a lot to the Tilean Legion, the very tanky hammer units that were in the front of his line. So now I have to cover a very large amount of ground to silence those cannons up on that hill there, and that's going to, of course, keep me open to a lot of artillery fire as I come in. I have only a handful of Greatbeards left, only a handful of Elders left in 2 of those Elder units, and maybe a couple of Longbeards at this point, and maybe a remnant of an Ironbreaker unit as well, but I don't have that much left. He has even less, though. He has 2 full-strength crossbow units, I believe 3 men left in one of his Cataphracts unit, that's his general, and then the Grudgebringer cannons themselves. So he's going to be trying to kite, of course. It is a little buggy with Medieval 2 because they'll stop to reload, and then they'll continue to reload, even if you give them movement orders, but he is going to be able to pull away there before I charge in. Exhausted Dwarfs are not particularly fast, as you guys might imagine, and I'm just going to try to give chase and finally silence those guns before I lose the rest of my army. There is so little left on this field. That battle took it out of both of us. We both got our ass kicked, to be honest. I felt so bad for my Dwarfs right here, because they are so close to finally silencing that Grudgebringer artillery, and they take 2 punishing volleys. Look at that damage. The Grudgebringers are so accurate. They do so much damage as I'm crossing the field here. But it reminded me a lot of the movie Glory, where the 54th Regiment in the Civil War for the Union storms a Confederate fort, and they kill everything in the fort, and they're doing great, and they turn the corner, make it into the heart of the settlement, heart of the fort. They turn the corner and just get blown apart by Confederate artillery, and that reminded me a lot of that scene in that movie. But the Elders are finally going to make it in, only a handful of them left. I did forget to mention the fact that I do have 2 of my Norse Dwarf crossbows in the back still shooting in, so they're still alive as well, which is why the balance bar is so heavily in my favor. But Greatbeards and Elders about to make it into the cannons. I've shot one of them up. I was trying to get the Greatbeard. They're so slow. The Greatbeards are trying to get in. They're so slow. I think they are actually going to get in there before the cannons get their final shot off, but you can see how fast they're moving. They're charging, quote-unquote, right now, but it looks so silly. Exhausted Dwarfs are about the slowest things on the planet. And going to be able to cut up these gun crews. Not super easy, actually, because, again, they can stun lock you. The sword animations are much faster than the 2-handed animations for the Greatbeards. But there is his general. There are 2 guys left in the heavy cav cataphract unit for the Border Princes, and then if I can kill him, then the crossbows will probably won't be able to kite anymore. They're relatively low morale, so the morale shock from killing the general will probably make his army mass rout, or that's the idea anyway. So get my Norse Dwarf crossbows to start shooting into him as well. Is a cataphract unit, is tanky, gonna take a little bit to shoot to pieces, but I've moved up my crossbows very close to the line now, so they're very accurate. Killed one of them. Not gotten his gen yet, and just going to try to kill these last few men. Over on the other side, he actually had 2 more crossbows left, so he had 3 crossbows left on the field, and I'm trying to charge him. The Ironbreakers are now trying to get into melee. Again, super slow. A couple of them have made it in, and there is one hammer in there as well, but just trying to make him rout, and it's so frustrating because this is what the Dwarfs are bad at. In campaign, I can already imagine in the Total War Warhammer campaign, you win a great battle against the Greenskins, you're like, yes, I did it, I just crushed thousands of them, they're mass routing, I can kill a ton of them as they run away and not take any losses. Oh wait, no I can't catch up to a single one of them, my guys are way too slow. So that is one disadvantage Dwarfs are going to have in campaign, I can already tell you right now. Not being able to kill routing units is probably going to be very frustrating. you're going to have to kind of rely on your range units to do that, because your melee troops probably aren't going to be able to catch up to greenskins or goblins or some of the faster units in the game. Get to see some nice killing from the Greatbeards there. Only a handful of them left. Only a handful of the gun crews as well. And as soon as I kill this gen, this battle should be over. Please, just shoot him. Just get him off the field. And the end of this replay does get a little redundant as you see the crossbows kill one of my sad, poor, lonely hammerers running up the hill there. It does get a little redundant after I kill the gen, which is going to happen right about now. And yeah, he basically, Gojira just runs away with the crossbows, and I finally catch up to them, and then kill them, and they're out, and I take the field. So it was a really interesting battle. As you can see, the kills there were very even. We both took a ton of losses. But one of the things I noticed was that my Grudgethrower Catapults were absolutely horrendous. They can be very good if the enemy formation is very deep, but there's no reason to do that in this mod at all. You use spaghetti lines like you do in any other Total War game. So they only got like 30 kills a piece, tops. Some of my Elders did quite well, my Greatbeards did decently, but none of my units really stood out. Just in general, the tankiness of the Dwarfs allowed me to survive the cavalry charges and basically dish out all the damage I needed to. And I was finally able to cross that field under withering artillery fire and killed the Grudgebringers, and after that, I won the battle. So I hope you guys enjoyed Call of Warhammer today, and I'll be bringing you some more soon. Any Pride, signing out for now.